A recent article on Fortune highlighted a growing trend among baby boomers, and that is continuing to work well into their 60s and 70s. And it's not out of necessity. It's to have a little more mental stimulation, that social connection, and trying to find fulfillment that work provides. So we're going to talk about that today. This shift from leisure to work and retirement. Is it all that common? Is it going to work for you? We'll discuss that all next with Lee Perkins.
Welcome to the My Retirement Clarity Podcast, where our goal is simple, to help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement. The team at Perkins Wealth Management does this by helping good people make great decisions so they can enjoy an amazing retirement. And now, here's your host and financial advisor, Lee Perkins.
Well, glad to have you once again on My Retirement Clarity. I am Ben George. He's Lee Perkins, owner and financial advisor at Perkins Wealth Management. Lee, it's an interesting topic because, I think the whole goal of retirement, right, is to not work anymore. I want to stop working, but we're in this kind of age now where that's changing a little bit.
Yeah, it really is, and there's a lot of things that we'll kind of talk through on the show today. But I think this topic is one that I'm having more and more conversations about it, because the idea of the traditional retirement has definitely changed over the last probably 5 or 8 years in what I've seen.
And we're going to go through this article from Fortune. We're going to drop it in the show notes. It is behind a paywall, just a warning, so you might not be able to read all of it. But there are a couple takeaways, but more of the bigger picture, just kind of how this applies to people that I know you're working with in Macon and around Georgia, Lee. I'm kind of curious what you're seeing and kind of working through this. But, one interesting thing from this, and one thing you see right off the top is almost 20% of Americans 65 and older are employed. So it's interesting to see how many baby boomers are working and whether it be for this mental stimulation or social connection rather than financial need. What are you seeing from this trend? Are you seeing something similar? A lot of people this age range still working, and why are they doing so?
Yeah, I think people hear stories and this is just my experience. Some people that I'm seeing coming in the office, they hear stories of people retiring who have nothing to do and go sit at home. And it doesn't do a whole lot for the health, and they don't live very long. And so I think some people are scared of retiring, doing nothing, and dying because they get less healthy. But other people just want to, they don't really have this grand retirement planned out where they've got a bucket list of travel places, but they want to still be engaged socially with other people. So that's sort of what I'm seeing. And I even see a lot of people now that enjoy what they're doing. And so they're like, if they're going to pay me, because employers are desperate right now for workers that want to work. And there's a lot of knowledge in somebody who's 65 years old that's been in a company for a long time. And if that knowledge walks out the door, they have to replace it with somebody that's probably not as gung-ho about, being the company man or whatever that is. But yeah, I think people like just to still be engaged. And if they feel they can still add value to the company, they're okay with staying for a little bit longer.
Yeah, and it's a great option to have. It's a wonderful, problem to be facing, right? Do I want to continue working and having that option to do so? But I know a lot of people do struggle with that transition, and we've talked about it some on this show, Lee, but you do have this loss of purpose or this kind of feeling of loneliness once you leave the workforce, because so much of your day-to-day is attached to your job. So what advice do you give people that you see that kind of struggle with this feeling, right, of transition to retirement and not having that connection from work anymore?
Yeah, so kind of two thoughts here. The first one is most people, I don't know, I don't know this. Well, I guess it is most 65, 70% of the people that we work with that retire, generally, about 3 to 6 months after retirement, they've filled their days with something that keeps them busy. And generally they will say, hey, I don't know when I had time to work. Now, right. These are the people that have, maybe younger grandkids and are still involved in their lives more than they are when their, grandkids are in their late teens and 20s. That just sort of happens, but they got things going on. They're young enough to go play golf and pickleball and all these kind of things. So there's things going on. But people that retire sometimes a little bit older, they don't have those things to fill that time, that loss of purpose or loss of relevance is a real thing, especially for people that are, maybe C-level employee, C-level retirees, and maybe they had, 20 or 50 or whatever many people reporting to them while they were working, and then all of a sudden they retire. Nobody needs them, and all of a sudden they are now reporting to their spouse at home. And that is a big shift. That's definitely a big shift for a lot of people. You went from being the boss, of 50 or 100 people to now you've got a boss at home that you report to every day. And that can be a stress on marriages too. So it can be a pretty a challenging time from a marital standpoint too, because you got to get into the routine, got to get into the flow. Because while you're working, you're with your spouse from 5:30 or whenever you get off work till that morning. And once you retire, boy, you're in the same house all day, every day. And that can be a challenge.
It sure can. It sure can. And I want to quickly take this moment to remind people about your next phase book, because I know a lot of this conversation we're having, that book is perfect for it, because it is about preparing for that next phase of life, right?
Absolutely. So it's just a short book that we wrote. Gosh, it's probably been 2 years ago now, but I think gives a lot of practical tips for folks who are kind of thinking about transitioning to their next phase. And you can get a copy of that book. Just text the word next phase to 478-475-2050. I think in that book, I do share a little bit of a story of when my parents retired. My dad retired a little bit before my mom, and that was a difficult time period for both of them, because mom didn't really, she wasn't really hip on my dad kind of being in bed when she was still getting up and going to work. So it didn't take him very long to understand it was in his best interest to go ahead and wake up and get dressed while she was getting dressed. And his life got easier after that.
That's funny. Well, yeah. So text next phase to 478-475-2050. Book is complimentary. It's just for thank you for listening to the show, and hopefully it will help you out or someone in your family as well. All right, a couple more things to go through from this article. I know it mentioned this idea of phased retirement. You touched on this a little bit, and these flexible work arrangements that are available now. But I'm curious, from a planning perspective, Lee, what do you need to be thinking about if you are going to continue work, even if it's in a part-time fashion or as a contractor, but if you still have income coming in, what are some of the planning items you need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so this has really become more and more popular really since COVID. And I've got some clients who have retired, in a traditional retirement and gone back to work even for the same companies or for a different company in a consulting role, and they are absolutely thriving. They're making in some cases almost as much as they were while they were full-time, and now they're working 20 hours on a flexible schedule or part-time, and they're like, man, I could do this until I'm 75. I'll do this as long as the company will have me. So this is a good thing. You certainly don't want to retire and go take a job that you don't have any say-so over the schedule. Again, the time is the most important thing, and your ability to work the flexible hours is what appeals to a lot of people, because it's like I say on this podcast all the time, people eventually realize that time is their most valuable resource. And so that becomes more important the older you get. 100%, I believe that. Hey folks, Lee Perkins here. I wanted to tell you about our brand new book called Next Phase, How to Retire in a Year or Less Without Regrets. It's all about helping you prepare for the next phase of your life, whatever that looks like for you. So, if you're ready to make the most of your next phase, or if you're already retired and aren't sure you're doing all you can to get the most out of your retirement, then you'll want a copy of this book. All you have to do is text Next Phase to 478-475-2050, and we'll send you a copy right away. You can also access additional resources and register for one of our upcoming workshops at our website, www.myretirementclarity.com. Thanks for listening. Now back to the show.
Yeah, it does indeed. So I mentioned this off the top with the 20% of Americans still working at age 65 or over. What changes with planning, Lee? Because I know, depending on what age you plan on stopping work, obviously will depend on planning. But as you continue to live longer and work longer, what does that change from your process?
Yeah, so from our process, the main thing it changes is the income planning, because if somebody's still working, depending on how much they're making, that obviously affects their Social Security claiming strategy. Now, I'm a big fan of claiming early, and that has been a shift in my thinking over the last 5, 6 years, simply because I see more and more people pass away early. If you'd have met me 10 years ago, I would have put your Social Security situation in a spreadsheet and said, hey, let's delay as long as possible because I can show you how you'll get $80,000 more over your lifetime. And that's just math. But the math doesn't account for people passing away early or people just getting older and not doing less. And most of my clients who are over the age of 80, their Social Security check just goes direct deposit into the bank and they never spend it. So if somebody's going to work 65 past there and they're still working, definitely changes Social Security, but it also allows them an opportunity to continue to save a little bit more money. Tax planning becomes a little bit more into focus because they are closer to that age of RMDs. And so maybe we're not doing tax deferred savings as much, and we're saving in some other tax buckets. So yeah, a lot to consider there.
You ever think about kind of what the future might hold for future generations? I know we see the differences generationally with the baby boomers and the way they're looking at retirement. What do you think about younger generations? Do you think we'll continue seeing this shift towards work? I know a lot of people now that are younger prioritize leisure over work, it seems.
Yeah, I don't know. As I think about that, it seems like I don't know if it's Japan or China. One of those countries, the term retirement doesn't even exist. And I read an article about that a couple of years ago, and I thought that was pretty fascinating. So yeah, I think the idea of a traditional retirement, the way it was 30 years ago, where you work with a company for 30, 40 years and retire with a pension and that company takes care of you. That certainly seems that doesn't happen very often in today's world. And I think probably our view of retirement, what's going on, how most people retire now, we might look back on what's going on now in 30 years and say, man, how did people even do that? So yeah, I don't really have a great answer for that, but the Gen X and younger generation, they definitely have a different idea on things.
They do. And, no matter what, the best thing you can do is work with someone that is doing this every day. They kind of sees mistakes that get made or sees the challenges and knows different strategies for overcoming them. And, as needs change, so will planning. And Lee and the team at J.L. Perkins Wealth Management can help you out no matter what your goals are in retirement, whether you want to work, whether you want to get done as soon as possible and never work again, whatever that might be. The best thing you can do is schedule a meeting. Just go to talkwithjlp.com. Again, talkwithjlp.com, and you can schedule a time to meet with Lee. It's a quick, early first meeting and get to learn more about you. But most importantly, it's taking that next step towards that financial goal that you might have later in life. And again, take advantage of that book offer, because that next phase, that's what it's all about, right? Planning for that. 478-475-2050 is the number. Just text next phase to get a copy of that. All right, Lee, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
That's it, man. It was a good show. Hopefully this has been useful for the listening audience, and look forward to getting together next time.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you listening to My Retirement Clarity. For Lee Perkins over at J.L. Perkins Wealth Management, I am Ben George. Take care. Have a good week.
Hey there, Lee Perkins here. If you're like a lot of folks, you've been listening to this podcast for a long time now. But I've got an important question for you. Have you implemented any of the ideas that we've discussed on the show? If you haven't, what are you waiting on? You know you're not getting any younger. So here's my challenge. Don't just consume the content. Our number one goal for this podcast is to help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement. So if you're ready to implement, take that first step today and visit www.talkwithjlp.com and schedule a 15-minute phone call with one of our advisors, and we'll help you close the gap between what you know and what you implement so you can enjoy the next phase of your life. Now is your time. Don't procrastinate any longer.
Investment advisory services are offered by J.L. Perkins Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor and insurance agency. Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Always consult with a qualified tax, legal, or investment professional before taking any action.